Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know how synths work before the pandemic at all. I was just like, you know, whatever. It's like, I feel like you have to like develop a relationship with a piece of gear or it's worth it. And if there's too many pieces of gear to have a relationship with all at once, you're just like inundated with a ton, then it kind of doesn't matter. Like so up here, I have a DX7, right? Most people hate the DX7 with a passion. I love it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Record Process. This week we are joined by an incredibly talented musician, Mr. Skyler Acord. A lot of you might know Skyler from his work as the bassist and songwriter behind the genre-bending metal band Issues. Some of you may have even caught him out on the road this past year playing bass for 21pilots. But on top of all of that, Skyler has been hard at work on a solo project that is culminating this year in the release of an EP titled True Viridian. As we dig into how these songs came together, Skyler talks in depth with us about honing his craft as a songwriter. He also discusses using the tools around him and even tapping into the strengths of his brother, Grammy-nominated record producer Low File. We get inside his head about the differences between developing song ideas from a top line first or from an instrumental composition, and how he's come to learn that limitations and restrictions in gear or instruments can actually be a huge asset in spurring his creativity. He has some really valuable thoughts about using what you have to shape your own sound, and it's all coming up right after this. So many of the albums that we'll be highlighting this season on The Record Process share one very important theme. And that's the idea of technology helping musicians and creators overcome the collaborative restrictions that once came along with geographic location. Thanks to companies like Audio Movers, real-time remote audio production and the tools that make it possible are more powerful than ever. Their groundbreaking Listen To plugin allows you to stream, record, and collaborate on high-quality audio in real time and is used on a daily basis by world-class audio engineers and professionals at places like Capitol and Abbey Road Studios. Their new Pro plan allows you to stream up to 150 users simultaneously, includes custom branding, and even allows you to stream MIDI data in real time. So head on over to audiomovers.com and enter the code RECORDPRO to get 1 month free off your Pro membership today. So as you already know, we do a lot of talking about the creation of original music here on The Record Process. I mean, that's kind of our thing. But it can also be fun to put your own spin on an old classic and tell the world something else about yourself through something like a cover song. Cover songs can be a really interesting way to connect with your existing fan base, or even a way to put yourself in front of new audiences through shared musical tastes. And our friends at DistroKid have made it super simple to upload a cover of your favorite song while allowing them to handle all of the back-end licensing work that can really be a headache for independent artists. DistroKid will notify the composer and publisher of its release, they will pay the necessary licensing fee, and they will take care of all the other legal red tape involved with releasing a cover song on a streaming platform, allowing you to fully focus on enjoying the process of putting your unique artistic spin on that recording. If you're already a DistroKid member, you can access this as you're uploading your track for $12 a year per song. Or if you're not yet a member and you'd like to sign up for DistroKid, you can use the link in our show notes to get 30% off of your first year's membership. Skyler Acord, welcome to The Record Process. It is a pleasure to have you, my friend. Yeah, how are you doing right now, man? You've been busy this past year.
Man, I'm great. Like you said, I've just been so busy, just like lots of touring with 21pilots and lots of like trying to release my music in between like breaks and stuff, trying to write issue stuff, just so much like,
yeah.
I don't know. It's nice to work.
And work you have, my friend. You've been doing a lot of it, and specifically, we're really looking forward to talking to you about the solo project that you have been working on, and this this EP, True Viridian, right? Under your name that has, I mean, sonically speaking, there's a lot to unpack. And Tom and I were really excited.
Right.
We hear at like a ton of super cool influences that I think before making any, assumptions or whatever, we definitely want to dive in and unpack. But yeah, so like with all of that going on in terms of being at the helm of so many things, whether, be your role in the production and songwriting with Issues or, the live performance stuff that a lot of people now caught you out on the road with recently with 21pilots, right? Ripping bass, to the masses out there. It's quite high energy stuff, right? And it's all like, obviously that, with Pilot stuff, it's very rhythmic, section intensive, right? And so much of this stuff. So like that brings us to this solo record, which, talk about, the who, the what, the where, and the why. Obviously, you're a prolific guy. There's a lot going on upstairs musically trying to get out. But this is you, and this is like your own thing, right? So
right.
So let's start there. Like, how did you decide where you wanted to go with it and what you wanted it to sound like? Because there's so many places that you've been with all that stuff.
Yeah. So I now I'm a little bit older and have been doing like, I guess, music professionally for, I guess at this point, Issues was 10 years ago is when we started. I'm realizing that my tastes go pretty strongly in phases. Like probably my first phase, it's just like what your parents listen to, right? And for me, that was like a lot of Jimi Hendrix and like Ohio Players and stuff. I'm half black, half white. So a lot of classic rock, a lot of classic funk, right? Stevie Wonder, big time, still a big influence. And then it was probably like progressive and extreme metal, and that kind of like led into the Issues stuff. As I was growing up, I kind of ignored punk like completely. I'd go to Warped Tour for the Monster stage because that's where all the deathcore bands were. I'd literally just stay there the whole time, But at some point in the last like 6-7 years, maybe less than that, sooner than that, I discovered like basically the whole punk tree of stuff. So it was like The Cure and like, I guess, like hardcore I've always liked, but, like more like punky hardcore than like, metal hardcore. But the band that really kind of got my wheels turning was Cocteau Twins. Do you know them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Case, you know them.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like hard to describe. And that's kind of the point, I think. That's why people like them.
Reverb.
Right, exactly. It's like so unintelligible. Like she sings in a strong Scottish accent. Like most of her lyrics are gibberish. And her melodies are all over the place. And the instrumentals are like really hard to like place. Uncanny Valley all over the place, right? It's like a guitar going through like a phaser or a synth filter or something, just some crazy stuff. But that basically, like, I listened to nothing but the Cocteau Twins for like a year straight. And that kind of just got me more interested in that sound than the whole shoegaze sort of free pop thing, I guess. Because I've always been interested in like kind of the hipster stuff, like Grouper and stuff. I guess the surface level. Grouper's awesome, but it's like baby's first dream pop artist, I guess. But I love Grouper. No hate.
And what's cool about this, dude, is like I love where we're already off to the races, like dropping a ton of like influences and names out there. But that's kind of cool. Is my hope is we always want to make it more of like a. I hope that like anybody listening might be like, who the fuck is that?
Totally.
And just kind of like go listen to it. That's the point, and it's like the story that like you're talking about, that it's like that might not be someone's bag right now, but like it could really open some doors or windows. You mean like, I don't know, Sky was just like drop that on that interview that I listened to. I'd never heard him, and go check it out. Pause this now. It'll be here. Go check it out. Go save those records. Like go back to them. Trust me. But I love that because you're already throwing out like a real cool list of ingredients for like what are we making here? So anyway, continue please.
Yeah. Well, I guess like with them specifically, Cocteau Twins, it was one of those bands that like, First time I heard it, I was just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I have no idea. Because I feel like naturally, us as musicians, when we hear something we don't understand that we like, it's like kind of frustrating in a fun way because it's like
you start to try to unpack it
right?
immediately. Yeah. And it's a gift and a curse too. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. My wife always says I like ruin music for her sometimes because she can't help but think about like, oh, I wonder how they wrote that. I wonder who produced this. I'm like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But right. So like anytime I run into anything that makes me think that hard about it, I just get obsessed with it. So I had to start trying to make it. But yeah, as far as like writing songs and stuff goes, most of the songs I started with were issue songs that like didn't make the cut that I thought were good enough, but maybe like they didn't resonate with our singer, or like maybe they just weren't the right vibe or something. Because my style is just like quite a lot different a lot of times from his. So I ended up with this backlog of songs, but typically what I'd write over is just like a piano loop, basically. Like I'd start with something really simple, loop it for 4 minutes, and then try to write as good of a song as I possibly could. Because if it slaps over like 4 chords on piano, it's going to slap when everything's like built out, right? So I started building out I started just writing a bunch of those, and then wouldn't you know it, 2 years on my ass, no touring. So I had a lot of time to start like fleshing stuff out and turning it into a real thing. Actually, right at the beginning of it, was when Knew It All Along kind of came together because I had it just like as a piano loop. And then right before, I guess this had to be before March 2020, I flew out to LA and kind of fleshed it out with my brother, then flew home, did a bunch more. And then I was like, wow, I guess I have a lot of time to myself now. Might as well keep going.
Dude, so piano loop, right? So that's where like some of that stuff starts. What is because I'd love to unpack like just like especially as a multi-instrumentalist, and now recently speaking, a lot of people know you as a killer bass player too. So there's that inherent level of like, okay, cool, let's get a rhythmic foundation going. And then do you just dive straight in on like a top line, or how does your brain then work from there, building something up and out in that way? Right. Right.
Actually, that's a good point that I kind of always take for granted, is that when issues, we kind of got in the habit of starting with the top line. Because it was really hard to, it was way harder to write a good song over a sick riff than write a sick riff under a good song. And we found that out, like, there was an entire album of us struggling with that. That's our second album, Headspace, the whole album. And I can't listen to it without thinking about how hard it was to write. But right, so I kind of was in that habit anyway. So typically I wouldn't even start with the rhythm section. I'd start with the vocal and then I'd build it down. So I'd do like, here's the vocal and here's the structure and everything. I know I want it to explode here somehow, maybe try a bass line, try a groove or whatever.
And so interesting how it can go 2 different ways. So this was you being able to really just go the other direction with it, right? Because you're not, and it was interesting. We were talking to another songwriter producer about how it almost frees you when there aren't those like really locked in like vocal top line expectations of how it needs to be framed and where it needs to go, that you can kind of like almost segment your process and go, hey, cool. I like this loop, this little progression, this little like trinket over here. It's like, this has got a cool thing, and it can just start with that. And so there aren't like, so it can be kind of freeing at the start with playing with ideas, I guess. Right. Which is really cool about doing it that other way.
Totally.
And then for you, probably like, talk about like loop world, probably fun to just get there and then start building up, an organic, like something that's fun to play through. Right. Like, cause these songs are also like, I don't want to hit it too on the head, but like, let me guess, you're a Prince fan, right? Like, and there's a bunch of stuff in there,
totally.
but that is like, it's all about that, like that core thing where you're just like, dude, you can't, like, I dare you to listen to this and not move. Right. In its own way. And it does it so well, and it's because you can kind of do that and then start to like think and sink in rhythmically, and then kind of push the top line stuff out and start thinking melodically to kind of extrapolate, which is awesome. So it's really cool. I think that's actually a great point. I'm glad you mention that and the juxtaposition of this project, because I think that's cool. You mentioned flying out there and workshopping stuff with your brother too, because this stuff was not without collaboration, right? So let's get into that too, because I think the other thing, everybody's like, solo record, like, it's like it pictures you just like there in the dark up at, all hours of the night, like, and I'm sure there's plenty of that, right? But like, it doesn't end there, 9 times out of 10, and I don't think this EP did, right, or these songs. So what does that look like? Talk a little bit about, I mean, you're probably close with your bro, so so there's probably an easy way. He was on your radar, but normally I'm like, so how'd you get connected with it? How did that come on, into your view? Okay, so my mom and dad also, right? Whatever.
My mom and dad.
So we don't have to ask that question.
It's like, I don't know if I should be the one to tell you this if you don't know already.
Yeah. It's weird. They were cool. And then we got into this whole birds and the bees conversation. It was super fucking awkward. I pretended that my router cut out again for a third time and just never came back on. So at what point did you you mentioned flying out there. How much of this stuff was like kind of framed out before you brought it, in the studio and went out there? And maybe for people that don't know, your brother also does a lot of cool stuff in his own lane. So,
Right. I'm acknowledging my privilege of having a Grammy Award winning twin brother.
Right.
So,
very well said. But yeah, so what did that look like?
So I'm Skyler, he's Tyler. Or Ty. I'm Sky and Ty. We rhyme.
We're twins. Whatever. It's a thing.
But it's the most twinning thing ever. Right. So growing up, we'd always be playing in bands together. He is a drummer, actually, originally. Well, originally, he's a turntablist. A lot of Issues fans know him as like the scratcher guy or whatever. And they're like, oh, that's cute. But no, that fool is like the Yingwei Malmsteen of turntablism. Like, he's
holy
insane.
That dude, what a picture. Okay, I love that phrase. That's niche. Yeah.
I would argue a little more tasty than that, but
okay, good.
Me and Ty actually got a really good creative flow in Issues. Everything kind of goes back to Issues because that's where I really sharpened my teeth. And kind of one of the things we do all the time was theory craft before we come up with an arrangement for a song. Like, yo, what if we had like this and then like this kind of thing, or this influence and then reggaeton and then death metal, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of came in, initially it was just one of those piano loops. It was just Knew It All Along over like 4 minutes of like, just like block chords, right? Because I suck at piano. So I brought that in. And he just grabbed my MIDI and we threw it on some synths and kind of just built it out. Like, yo, what if it was like this kind of drum, that kind of thing. But the kind of North Star, or the idea the whole time, was to mix post-punk and shoegaze and that whole dream pop kind of world with R&B and funk. So that's like kind of just like my jam anyways. It's like all my playlists, they just all look like that anyways.
Yeah.
And Knew It All Along was more or less the template. And he basically took my ingredients and like he probably did like 70-80% of that basically, and then we were as far as like ideas and stuff, and then we moved on to the song that's coming out next, which is Not Worth Saving, which might be out by the time this airs. That was more of a 50-50 thing, and then I went home and I was just set loose. So everything else on the EP, I basically did like 85% of it. And then I either went to Ty or Low File, as he's known professionally. I went to Low File to either like, help me with some problems or like finish stuff or like extend like a section, stuff like that. So basically like the whole like inception of it, I didn't really know where to start. And he kind of gave me like a direction, that wasn't just like theoretical.
Interesting. Okay. But it starts with what, and I love the phrase that you use, theory crafting, I believe, which is a great way of talking about it. And Tom and I, honestly, I feel like it was a couple of those theory craft sessions when we first like got in on our studio spot together. And we were like, those were the conversations that were like, yo, should we like do this with other people, like that were like literally pretty much what probably birthed this show, honestly enough. So I love taking that approach to it, and especially someone like your brother, who y'all have made plenty of music over the years anyway. So it's probably this own like shorthand that you guys have developed, you know, with like volleying shit at each other. But what a cool way of doing that, especially when it comes to, you know, like we said at the start, you can go anywhere with this, right? You know, so, you know, like the toughest part to frame out was kind of which direction do you face before you start taking those steps and running. And then once you had that, I love that, dude. That's awesome. Then you could kind of just start going nuts because you knew you were calibrated and saw the vision coming together. That's awesome.
The hardest part is working with infinity. So as soon as you chip down infinity, you know, it's like Michelangelo. It's like he just takes away everything off of the giant piece of rock that doesn't look like David, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's the hardest part.
It was there all along. I just had to get rid of all the other stuff that wasn't it. Yeah.
Right.
Well, brilliant.
But yeah, so that was probably the most fun part of the process, is just coming up with it. And then at that point I was living in Ohio. Now I'm in LA, so we're working together a lot more IRL. But I was responsible for doing, I mean, basically it was, I was just in the situation where I had to do like all the work, or 90% of it, and then bring it into him, just because we didn't have a whole lot of time together. And he's just so powerful. Like, frankly, like anything I bring into him, I want it to be as ready for his juice as possible.
I love that. Yeah.
When you were in like Ohio, what was your tracking rig like? Was it like just bare bones, like here I am, bedroom style, or like did you have like a setup out there in some capacity?
Oh, it's bedroom, man. It's so, yeah, it was so DIY.
Hell yeah.
And actually, you know, one of the ways I got started, like actually like recording stuff that made sense, because initially it was just like one of those like Apogee ones, one of those Apogee interfaces. I didn't have anything else. The worst, but it worked, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then I did a record with the home team over the pandemic, and they were just like a local band at that point that, you know, I played metal with a couple of them like years ago.
Yeah.
And they hit me up to help them produce their record. And part of it was like, okay, yeah, this is the, you know, payment, here's the deals or whatever. Also, buy me an Apollo Twin. So I made him buy me an Apollo Twin. And so ever since then, that's pretty much my whole thing. I mean, as you can see, I have all these government money synthesizers behind me. Just sitting on my butt during the pandemic. Like, what am I going to do with all this cash? It's like, I guess I'll do my due diligence and support the economy, the American way, you know?
There you go. No, do that. I mean, dude, the power and truly like the, you know, the UAD stuff, obviously, like, you know, that's the rig there at the studio. I'm running like the quad is just what I do. I can take it on tour.
Right.
It can get you really far real quickly. So there is, and so when we say that's like where you work with just like a bedroom setup or what's like, there's no shame in that, dude. The people are making fucking Grammy winning records out there on this with a 57 and just a quarter to quarter, like get it done. You know what I mean? It's like
Steve Lacy, man, that album was on a what, iPad or something?
That's right, dude.
Yeah, dude, that and then we just had on another guest that was telling us like Post Malone has like his rig is just a twin and a mic, and a mic, and like that's what it is, and it's more so a matter of the vibe that you yourself, Skyler, are creating in your head and translating to the laptop, if you will. But like, yeah, I don't know if like stigmatizing like bedroom. I don't even want to throw that out there. Like, it's more so about creativity, and I love that. Like, this was you're playing bass, huge band, and you have such a pedigree with writing, with like issues and like there's this whole pedigree and all of that, and now you're let loose on infinity with this Apollo. I love that. So,
sorry, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I tell people all the time, I'm sure you guys run into this all the time, where people go like, where do I get started? Like, what do I do? How do I get something that sounds like this and that? It's like, what you have is what you sound like. I teach a lot, right? and a lot of them are songwriting lessons. And there's a lot of kids out there, you know, in like their like early 20s, mid 20s, who for one reason or another just have like way more cash at hand than I did at that age, which is awesome. But like I run into this so much where they'll just like buy everything they think they need. Some YouTuber told them to get this and that, whatever. And then they'll have all the stuff, but like not the ideas. And I tell, you know, especially like that kind of person, I tell them all the time, like, stop buying stuff, learn what you have, what you get to know and what you're good at. Like, you know, the gear, you know, that's your sound. Like most of the interesting stuff that I initially started, the interesting sounds that I initially found came from, I'm looking at it right now, but it's this weird Lexicon effects rack that like no one has or wants, that my dad bought in like the 90s and just like sat in a garage forever. But I was like, oh, no one has this. And I think you can buy them for like $150. But like, I got one pedal, my first pedal, and it was this. It's just like a tube screamer. And I had one guitar. So I sent my one guitar through my one pedal, through my one effects rack, and it sounded weird. And I just like went forever on it.
Dude, and you just making it work. And I think that's such especially for anybody like, you know, we try to, you know, a big part of this is trying to like bring in voices that can really put forward some insights and knowledge like that. And I do a lot of like artist coaching outside too, and like try to like bring some value in terms of like some mentorship and answering a lot of those questions. And half the time it's like, stop like putting things in the way, you know, like those are all kind of a distraction of like, you know, we all love buying gear, right? It's just like you get to a point where you're like, ooh, I could just sort through reverb for something that's going to make it sound. It's like, yeah, but it only is going to be great if you can play something rad through it, right? So that's the point. It's only as good as the source, and that source, what you're talking about with songwriting and, you know, everything, the craft, especially of, you know, this kind of EP, it's all upstairs. You know what I mean? It's all about like figuring out what it is, what the vision is, and getting it and chopping it out. And anything else, like if you would have just been wasting time if you were sewing a whole string of pedals together before you knew what the general riff was going to be. You know what I mean? So
that's another infinity on top of the infinity that
and I think
you're right.
So limitations are so helpful.
That's right. I love this, dude. Honestly, the inverse, like counterintuitive, creative mantra of just like infinite possibilities. It's literally the worst thing that could possibly happen to you as a creative. It's debilitating. But that's a great point, right? It's just like you like, yo, give me something that I can just plug and play and get ideas out onto paper real quick, right? That's why a lot of people still like, even though you can just like fly on a keyboard, spell check, all these things, Google. So there's still plenty of people that are just like, yo, give me a pen and paper, because nothing else just gets in the way and I can think something and write it immediately. Even me, it's just like, I'm not a good typer. Like most people I think that are like our age or like over 30, it's just like, I didn't do the typing course. Like I didn't do my typing homework, whatever. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I still like kind of what some would call chicken peck, and my left hand just wants to gravitate towards all Pro Tools shortcuts now. So I'm screwed, you know, but yes, that is the point of like the same reason why people go back to pen and paper, because you can have an idea and just shorthand it real quick. I think it's the same thing. Just get yourself an interface and basic, and then figure out the sonics of it after you know there's an idea worth chasing and worth dressing up. Dude, that's awesome. And that's why this, you know, because this record and your EP overall, those songs and everything before it too, is built on the foundations of that. So what a great thing to reinforce, man. If you're an audio engineer or musician that's dedicated to creating and releasing new music consistently, then you already know that process can be long, complex, and often expensive, especially while you're trying desperately not to sacrifice the type of quality that is crucial for your mixes to stand up to those big budget productions. Producer and friend of the record process, Jay Moss, has reimagined these roadblocks to quality that plague us all. With the help of world-renowned sound engineers, Jay developed an AI-based platform called Master, which offers you the ability to quickly upload your song and receive a high-quality mastered edition in minutes, all at a price point that won't break the bank with each new mix revision. The platform also allows you to easily collect feedback from clients and collaborators, And it even caters to the perfectionist in us all by allowing you to quickly compare and contrast different iterations of each track as you make those final subtle tweaks. So for a limited time this season, you as a Record Process listener can not only try Monster for free, but you can also receive a 20% discount on your first membership by using the code PROCESS on their website at checkout. So hit the link in our show notes or visit maastr.io for more info. So a lot of people think that Oxford Pennant makes, well, pennants. You know, the triangular wool flag type things that usually have like a sports team's logo or the name of a place printed on them. Well, to be honest, that is what I thought too before my band The Wonder Years had the chance to work with them. Through that process, we realized just how much care they put into their beautifully crafted, iconic keepsakes that remind us who we are and why we do what we do. They've teamed up with some massive artists in the process, bands like My Chemical Romance, Wilco, and 21pilots, just to name a few. And they even offer custom shop orders for artists, companies, and unique events or special occasions. So please do yourself a favor and head over to oxfordpennant.com and use the code RECORD15 to receive 15% off your first retail purchase from their web store.
Skyler, I'm wondering, like, is there a moment on the EP you're like, oh, dude, this would have never happened if I never had this anti-infinity loop going on, right? Like that came out of that Lexicon Tube Screamer combo.
Yeah, actually, so the last song on the EP, it's called Decay. It's not going to come out as a single. So there's going to be one more single, and then the last two songs are going to come out. Mm-hmm. It's one of those, and it's real weird. And it was basically after I went out to LA and fleshed out Knew It All Along with Low File, I went home and I immediately just like sat at my computer. I was just like, what can I do? Because I realized that basically just like I already had the tools. Like I had a bunch of cracked plugins from like 2011, that were still working somehow. They were still chugging along. And I had my bass. I didn't have any gear whatsoever except for this Lexicon thing. And basically I just sat down and threw a bunch of plugins on my bass and just started experimenting. Came up with like a really cool, like distorted sort of phasery sound. And even still, now that I have access to more resources and more like sound toys and stuff, it's still just like the cruddy, like cracked stomp waves plugin with like the phaser, the bad distortion or whatever, just because I thought it sounded cool. And I just kind of like built the whole song around that. And it was just kind of like liberating because for a long time I did let the limitations like stop me. And, there's moments where I had like moments of clarity where it's like I'm writing a song and recording it with my laptop mic. True story. Bunch of those. There's like instances where I'm like, using my voice memos on a plane or something. But that's as far as it got. But basically just going out there and kind of just realizing that like I don't need it to sound like a finished product. I can like do the demo, allow it to sound like shit. But as long as the idea is there that I've done something, it was just so liberating. And I just did that. I just made a bunch of demos that sounded like shit, but had like ideas I liked.
Dude, and I love kind of how you're phrasing that to Skyler, because there's like a point where you mentioned like a lot of young songwriters are like, what do I do? How do I like make some, some progress on this and really make some headway? And one of the things that I've started kind of gravitating towards is just saying, go write a bunch of bad songs. Like you're going to write bad songs. You got to just go write and finish them and let them be bad. Let hindsight be 20/20. But in finishing each one of those, you're actually letting it happen and you're letting yourself grow and leaning into that. And that's the only way. It's the same way because you're disarming that kind of perfection. Because I think what happens is in those moments, you have that voice note, you have that little bit of like that like 30 seconds, a minute of a demo. And you're like, yo, there's so much potential here. But like every time you start to try and go tack that next section on, you're like, nah, that's not right. Nah, that sucks. That's killing it. Right. It's like, just let that be the next section that you're like, okay, I can live with this, right? Maybe it's not like perfect. And in that, if you get to the end, then you finally unlock something and go back and be like, oh, this is what I actually needed to do there. But you never got to that next stage. So you got to go write the bad songs. You know, you got to like walk through it and let it be just not great at first and not worry about like, is this worthwhile? Is it going to turn out? We're creatives. We're artists that live in uncertainty. That is our partner. That is our perpetual sidekick, right? So the second you can just be like, fine, it's always going to be there, but let me go turn this into a full song and see what happens.
Right. You never know if it's going to suck until you finish it. And then even if it sucks, there might be like a little piece of it that makes it into another song, or you know, it's always worth it. It's all part of, as we say, the process. Tom, we say it.
Right. Well, and like, honestly, hard drive space is so damn cheap in comparison.
Yeah.
It's like, why not?
Facts.
Right. It's not, you're not burning up tape. Yeah, exactly. It's like, you know, it's not like you're not burning up tape. It's not like you know, you're not even back to like, we came up with like the 4-track Tascam, you know, cassette recorder type stuff, which I love and miss mine dearly. But it's not even like that where you're like, oh God, I got like, you know, like 300 of these cassette tapes around. How am I going to like sort through it? It's a lot easier in the digital realm. It really is to just go and be like, oh, I remember this one weird idea was pretty cool. Or just go through and audition all of them and be like, I'm going to pull that and work on that because that's sparking joy right now again. And maybe that's worth it because you got through it and finished it. So I love that where it finally took. And I think this is such a big thing too, where it's like the fact that you didn't have a lot of stuff around you was probably what allowed you to do it. Whereas, you know, it could have been debilitating if someone gave you the keys to whatever like commercial studio with every wall full of every synth. You've been like, you're like kid in a candy store, like, you know, just distracted. Like,
right. I mean, I didn't even know how synths work before the pandemic at all. I was just like, you know, whatever. It's like, I feel like you have to like develop a relationship with a piece of gear or it's worthless. And if there's too many pieces of gear to have a relationship with all at once, you're just like inundated with a ton, then it kind of doesn't matter. Like so up here, I have a DX7, right? Most people hate the DX7 with a passion. I love it. I totally understand it in and out. Everybody complains about programming it because it is the worst. It's definitely the worst. But because it was my first synth, it was the only thing I had. So if I wanted to mess around on a synth, I was going to figure out this damn DX7. So over the pandemic, there were so many nights where I just like grabbed a beer, jumped on FaceTime with like, you know how like everybody was like FaceTiming their group chats for like solid like 3 months.
Yeah.
So I do that, you know, throw headphones on or whatever. And I, you know, just mess around on this thing, come up with patches or whatever. So now, even though everybody hates this thing, and I have like way nicer stuff now. It's still the one I use all the time, like more often than anything.
That is beautiful. Skyler, I might ask your permission to go ahead and steal that phrase and tack it on as the mantra to our Gear Candy subsegment that we run. Because normally we ask at the end of a session or in tandem with it, you know, we ask everybody about their favorite one piece of gear. But like, you know, gear is worthless unless you form a relationship with it, you know, like is a brilliant way of putting it and so true and speaks volumes because that's what really matters. You know, it's not that you have every piece, it's that you care about and this is why we decided to do you know, a specific highlighted Gear Candy style segment because that it's its own sense of inspiration, you know, that you get from that relationship exactly as you said it in that piece of gear. So I love that so much. And it's just like, if you got to like wring it out like a sponge, whatever one thing it has, and push it to its limits, right? And nothing better than a pandemic to have all of us be like, I'm going to find every single thing, good, bad, and ugly that this thing can do, you know? And that's kind of nowadays, I think it's very easy to be on to the next plugin or like, oh, I want my like mixes to sound better. What piece of software am I missing? What plugin am I missing? You know, whatever. It's like, nah, like, what are you missing when you listen? You know what I mean? Like, what, you know, like figure out a way to like get better at the actual listening and understanding portion of it. And that's why like I'm a huge proponent of just like, dude, honestly, if you took away, you know, whatever. And probably the same goes for like your brother and anybody, like any world-class mixer now. It's like, dude, it's not that they have any plugin they want for free. I feel comfortable that if I needed to, I could turn something around that moved somebody with whatever stock plugins. You know what I mean? Give me GarageBand. I feel like I could at least like make something.
Do not sleep on stock plugins ever, dude. Yeah.
I think, dude, that's what I'm saying. Like, start there. People are like, well, I don't have enough money to get like this bundle and that bundle. And that's what all like the big time, you know, all the big time cats are using. No, dude, like it's an EQ is like figure out what you can do that makes something interesting with an EQ. And any of those can do that. You know what I mean? And dude, so that's what a great thing that kind of rolls throughout everything.
It's super serendipitous that you bring up like the intimate knowledge thing, Skyler. I was having this conversation last week with someone where they were asking what's the definition of like love.
We're going deep, Sky. We're going deep. We're taking a left turn.
Heady conversation. But my answer was intimate knowledge. The fact that you have this intimate knowledge of the DX7 is like, it has a deeper meaning than like, oh yeah, I like this synth. That's great. To me, that you love that synth.
Right, I do.
And like that synth is a part of you and it's an extension of yourself. And so just to like resonate with your love for that piece of gear, I hope everyone has that intimate knowledge, or at least that piece of gear, that piece of equipment, that piece of any aspect of your life that you have the intimate knowledge of.
Yeah. And it's time in the trenches with that gear, dude. Tom, you're so smart.
Give me some snap.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, give me some of that. Give me some of that, dude.
Nah.
Oh, brilliant.
I would snap with both hands, but like, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see how bruised this hand is?
Oh man, what is that from?
I tripped over a dog and caught myself with my thumb. So my left hand is like, I can't do that. I can't.
Oh no!
I can't make
Honestly, an interesting limitation. Can't use your left hand. What are you going to do now?
You know what? Speaking of that, you know, "Sex Is on Fire," that Kings of Leon song.
Yeah.
You know the story of how he wrote that riff?
No. But if you're going to tell us, I'm very excited now.
Oh yeah, I guess he busted his left arm and it was in a cast, so he couldn't move it beyond like up here. So he had to.
Wait, so what new Skyler song are we getting that is like from the left hand, busted left hand?
Yeah, what are you working on that like for EP number 2 is going to be like, all right, so I tripped, bruised my hand, couldn't close it.
It's just going to be all the open strings of my bass.
Let's get it, dude. Alternate bass tuning. Let's go.
Dude, amazing.
We're here for it. Dude, but honestly, yeah, that restriction kind of breeds creativity. It really does. It really does. Especially when you only have one thing to work with, you got to try and stretch it and make a palette out of it. That's awesome, man. So like so let's get into so like lyrically and like thematically sewing together some of that, because you talked about kind of throwing ideas at a wall and having that kind of genre storming conversation and what kind of ingredients you could mix and match up. But ultimately, and this is what we talk about a lot, is we're telling the story behind the story, or the story that's the making of a story, song by song, album by album. What were some of the things, because this is another thing where you've had to do this with all the other projects, but thinking about what message you want to put through, like what you want the reaction to be, what reaction you want those songs to elicit, so where did you start with all that? Did you have ideas? Did you have voice notes? How does that whole thing work for you with this project specifically?
Right. So I think my favorite songwriters are really melodically minded. My favorite songwriter ever is probably Stevie Wonder. Just I've probably heard more of his music than any other single artist in my life. So it's just such a part of me that like I don't even know he comes out.
Yeah.
And if I was a better piano player, that's probably exactly how I'd play. But his melodic phrasing and how he just kind of takes like rhythmic phrases and uses them to make complicated and melodic ideas sound catchy. Because I forgot who put me onto this. I think in college someone mentioned this, but melody is probably 70% rhythm and 30% note choice, maybe. So like if you kind of have a catchy rhythm, then the notes you're singing are more or less there to enforce the rhythm and not the other way around, at least in pop, right? Because obviously there's so many different ways to hit that. Like if I was like true shoegaze or something, rhythm is out the door, right?
Right. It's texture and harmony, and overtones and all that stuff.
Exactly.
Dude, that's so true. That's actually, that reminds me, when I was in high school, I had a band director, and it was, when nobody could really play, or, a few people were kind of starting to poke through and were like, all right, that kid's going to be a world-class trumpet player. I think he just can't stop playing or whatever. But, we'd go around and we played in like our jazz big band. So we were doing everything from like Count Basie shit all the way to like more modern, like swing and big band stuff. And I remember we'd go around and be like, okay, everybody take 12, and like, it's just like whatever comes out. And half the kids were like, I can't solo. And he's just like, it's in this key, just do this. And she's like, yeah, but I just don't know. And eventually he just like stopped. He's like, pick one note and tell me a story with one note over those 12 bars. And that was like, that's the challenge. And I remember like you started seeing light bulbs go off because that was the round where everybody could only use one note and had to go 12 bars, but like make a moment happen. So you have to rely on rhythm, the inflection, the way you lean into that to kind of frame it differently. And that was the one that got everybody in the room the most jazzed up. It wasn't the one where you had every note in the scale to kind of use and run up and down. It was the one where everybody was limited. And that's the one where everybody was cracking up or just like, holy damn, I had no idea you had that in you, and immediately everybody had told these stories. So dude, that's exactly it. Wow. And I never thought of the ratio that way, but I think there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like, the things that I like, a lot of times, like rhythmically, it's I don't know. Like I feel like you can get a lot of different emotions across with a catchy rhythm. Like you're not exactly limited. There's a lot of melodic choices connected to like harmonic choices that really convey a specific sort of idea or emotional context. But I feel like rhythm is kind of like I don't know. Rhythm is more universal to where you can have a ballad and the melody be like, an Esther Dean melody where it's like rhythmically all over the damn place. Or you can have like a really like poppy song, a really like energetic rhythmic instrumental, but then maybe the vocals are like soaring over it. Like that's the post-hardcore special is like, really chaotic instrumental, like drummers going crazy and the singer's just like 3 octaves higher than he wants to be. Like
flying over top with like fucking like white snake footballs on top, just like wow.
Totally.
Yeah. No. Yeah, dude. I mean, that's a perfect example, actually. And you have to pick your choices, and the choices are way different from genre to genre. So in this case, you had already started to kind of make some of those choices instrumentally. So that probably dictated a bit of where you could go and or like what you wanted to do rhythmically or melodically for top line stuff.
Right. Well, actually, I mean, exactly, but backwards. So I was trying to make the vocal as effective. I feel like, you start with the thing that's most important and it'll be the most important. Or start with the thing you want to make the most important, it'll typically be the most important. So if I start with a vocal and try to make it as awesome as possible, and including the rhythmic sort of phrasing or whatever, then I know exactly where I can flex and where I should like hold back on the instrumental. So if I start with that vocal, then I know where to like pick my spots or whatever. But as far as like, the aesthetics of it, right? Like I knew if I had a good melody, I can kind of sing about anything. Cause I mean, God, turn on the radio.
Yeah.
Right. But I feel like EPs are a great opportunity for experimentation. And this EP is definitely like a big part of it. But there's a lot of like kind of exploring, I guess, Gothic imagery and themes. I didn't even mean for that to be a thing, but like, like loss, heartbreak, roses, thorns, romance, whatever. So like sort of drama in general. I just love drama.
So, well, dude, that's great.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, start thinking about the aesthetic, even with the cover art, and from seeing that, and now that starts to kind of make sense. Where did the title come from in this, and what did that have to do? You know, tell us where True Viridian came from. Yeah.
So actually, that was just initially supposed to be my artist name, and then I was like, I want people to like it.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna go with my own name, and I'll still keep the True Viridian idea alive. But basically, there's two stories behind it. I'll tell you the artsy story first.
Okay.
So the artsy sort of backstory is True Viridian is like finding your true colors. Really, it's like in between blue and green. It's not quite blue. It's not quite green. It's really in the middle. Viridian. It comes from, or it's kind of represents, at least to me, just being multicultural, never really feeling like I belong to any place, always feeling like I'm code switching. Like if I'm around a lot of metalheads, actually metalheads I felt more at home, but even though even then it's there's certain things that I felt like I couldn't talk about. I grew up really Christian, so if I'm around a bunch of black metalheads and I talk about it's a Saturday, it's what are you doing tomorrow? I'm like, nothing, so there's that. There's Warped Tour where it's I'm playing R&B and people are like, I've never heard this, and it's a #1 Stevie Wonder song from the 80s or something. I'm like, how could you not have heard Ribbon in the Sky before? Whatever. There's just parts of that everywhere in my life. So True Viridian, the idea is just basically making it known that you belong there, wherever it is.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of a testament to the genre, just mishmash of things, right?
Yeah.
That's the artsy story.
Oh, I love that. Well, I mean, we'll take story number 2, but man, that's right up my lane. Yeah.
Sick.
You're hitting on all the marks, planting your creative flag in the ground. All kinds of buzzwords like authenticity start coming up, and just and I do love that too, because, I think with a good name or a good song or whatever, it's it speaks to an artist's backstory, and this is another thing that I try to, talking with younger artists that have yet to be in projects long enough and develop that kind of vision and voice for whether it be, that specific project or overall, with their amalgamation of tastes. I think that's awesome. So it's kind of perfect that it would fit, this offering of your solo record. Okay. With that being said, what's story number 2?
So story number 2, and this kind of, there's a lesson here too, which is basically you can kind of find things and then attach meaning to it. It doesn't have to mean something right away. But initially where this actually came from is my roommate, who's one of my best friends, who I actually wrote a song on this EP with. He had a Pokemon-themed black metal side project called True Viridian Black Metal, like Viridian Forest.
Okay.
I was like, that's so cool. And I wrote that down. I sat on it for 8 years. I forgot where it came from. And then I started, then I came up with a whole concept around it or whatever. And then I started jamming on this other song, Star Junction, which is going to be on the EP. And he's like, wait, True Viridian? True Viridian Black Metal? I'm like, oh, I guess so.
Dude, here's the question though. So then now in hindsight, story 1 and story 2, which is actually more nerdy? You know what I mean? It's kind of close depending on who you are. Some people are like, dude, honestly, number 2, I love that. Some people are like, number 2 is funny, but number 1 is actually way nerdier from an artsy state,
Right. Number 2 is Lion Witch of the Wardrobe, Chronicles of Narnia. Number 1 is Lord of the Rings.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Truly. The epic saga. Wow.
Amazing.
Dude, what a beautiful way to wrap it up. Super excited. You mentioned that this group of songs is it does not end here. So what are the plans for the future? And if you don't have any, what do you think, what could this possibly look like, performing it live, or where does it potentially go from here? Even if you don't know, maybe some quick hypotheses from you, or what you'd like to investigate.
Yeah. So I'm super indie. So I'm kind of just taking it as it comes at the moment. I'm just focused on getting as much of my music out as possible. I've realized that there's a ratio. I really have a really specific ratio of I have to write four times the amount of songs I actually want to release to get like a release I like.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, I have enough for like at least 3 EPs. So
that's a lot of songs, my dude.
A lot of songs,
right? I know. It was 2 years, man. 2 years.
It was a long pandemic, Tom.
But right, right. So the first episode of TV comes out probably early next year. See what I did there?
Oh, I get it. I see what you did.
And then the second one will probably, I don't know. I'm trying to get 3. It's basically as fast as I can get them done, they're going to come out. And no plans for shows yet, but not saying no to shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to get some shit out and see what happens.
Amazing. Love that.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to see what happens as well, dude, and appreciate you so much for taking the time to chop it up with us here on the show. Yeah, this was a fun one, man.
Dude, thanks so much for hitting me up.
So one of the ideas that we riffed on for a little bit about halfway through this interview is the idea of developing a relationship with the gear that you do have instead of just amassing a list of the gear that you hope to get in the future. Maybe even more importantly than that is not letting the gear that you do have or don't have, what you can or can't afford, define the limitations around the quality of work that you can make, and instead looking at them as the opportunities to define a sound and a path that is uniquely yours and will move and evolve with you as an artist. Don't waste time waiting for the next perfect piece of gear to come along. It will not solve your problems. Spend this time right now getting acquainted with every possible way you can use the gear that you have at your disposal. Experiment with it, explore with it. It will ultimately make you a better creative and make you a better problem solver. And above all, it will make you appreciate the art that you create because you will respect the time and energy that went into it. And I hope you all know just how much we appreciate you spending your time with us here on The Record Process as we explore some great case studies and great records and try to learn from them and try to be re-inspired by them ourselves. So if you're finding value in this season thus far, or any previous episodes for that matter, all we ask is that you take a quick second, go leave us a quick review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to the show, and we will see you next week on
The Record Process.